Celia, how did Tiny Studios come to exist?
I think for Tiny, there wasn't ever really like a day of birth in particular. It was a long journey of, I guess, a love of filmmaking from my side. I was a freelancer initially, before that, making films since the age of 12. Very embarrassing music videos where I would just like dance around, edit them, and put them on YouTube, embarrassingly. But that kind of passion, I guess, throughout my time at school meant that I kind of was looking at how I could maybe make this something that I do longer term, full time, earn money from it as well. So essentially, yeah, after being a freelancer, having clients that kind of grew and kept coming back with bigger briefs, things that I couldn't do on my own, I realised that actually building a team and a company was going to be the answer. So 3 years ago, 3 years ago, Tiny was born.
Cool. So you arrived at the section to decide whether to become a sort of professional freelancer, if that's such a thing, or actually build a team to take on the bigger projects, and you decided to build a team. So how big are you guys at the moment?
We're 6 full-time staff, and then we have lots of freelancers. So it's almost like a wider, I hate the term family in business. I feel like that's got a really bad rep. So it's not a family at all, but it's more like we've just got this amazing network of creatives that we get to almost like use to kind of bolster what we're doing. And these are people who some of them I've worked with for like 7 years back from my freelance days. Some of them more recent, we're very lucky that we get a lot of people coming our way and wanting to work with us at Tiny. So it's sort of, that core team with our then lovely, really talented network of freelancers that actually, that's what Tiny, that's who we are.
Nice. With a team of 6 people, and you've talked a little bit before we turn the cameras on about working on fulfilling work. And there's lots of great projects out there, but only a finite amount of time in the day. How do you guys decide what's going to float your boat and what you want to put your energy and time into?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think especially coming from being a freelancer where, any freelancers who would be listening to this would probably relate to the fact that you never quite know when your next job's going to be. So the idea of turning anything down is terrifying. So you kind of just say yes to most things that you can, and that's how often you can lead to burnout. So I kind of came from that mentality, which now actually, as the company has grown and we're really lucky that we get a lot of people approaching us to work with us, it's almost been retraining to go, now, okay, we don't have to say yes to everything. There will be more work coming down the line, trying to remind that. And then now we're trying to be more selective on actually are the partners who we're working with, are they people we like? Do we align with what their vision is for their company? Do we believe in what they're building? Do we believe in the way that they approach the work that they're doing? And also, are they, how are they impacting the world around them? Is that something that they're caring about, that they're looking into? We're trying to be a bit more selective. Ultimately, we love any partner who's trying to do something a bit different in their field as well. But I think, bottom line is like nice people make really good work. And I think so much of what we do as a service-based business is very collaborative. So actually it's teamwork from both sides, and we really work with our partners to make the project a success. So I think that understanding, when we're having those initial calls with clients to be like, could this project work? It's just trying to make sure that we're on the same page there.
So is that how your due diligence is done, when talking about what kind of brands you want to work with? Is it done just through those initial calls just to try and sound each other out and see if it's a right fit?
Yeah, I think so. It's, ultimately, I guess I'd like to think the brand that we're building with Tiny is fairly strong. So we rarely get approached by partners who are not a company that we'd probably love to work with. Like, we're very grateful with everyone who comes our way. So fortunately, it's almost a bit of natural selection there. We're very rarely having to turn any work down on that kind of morals basis. But also again, that thing of collaboration, like we're big believers in feedback and checking in. So often we'll, after a first project, we'll have feedback on both sides, see how it went, see like if there are things that we can do on our side or that the partners can do on their side to make the process better in the future. So I guess at that point as well, I do also check in with the team, everyone who worked on the project. Of course, if there was a situation where they were made to feel uncomfortable or something went wrong, then that might be the grounds for where we go, actually, okay, this might not be for us as well. So it's just constantly checking in, really.
This is a tricky thing about media production, or it strikes me as we spend a lot of time speaking to B2B services and products which are sold as kind of matter of fact. You buy what you see, and what it is on the side of the can. But when you're building video and making video for someone, of course, the kind of outcome is less predictable.
Yeah.
And as you grow and take on the bigger projects, how do you kind of, in the early stages of meeting a client, understand and visualize what's going to come out the other end, or is it based on the portfolio of work you've already made so far?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mixture, to be fair. It slightly depends on what the partner comes to us knowing they want. So sometimes we get quite strict briefs in terms of they've already done the work, either internally or with another agency, to determine exactly what they want from the films or the campaign, and what results, either literally what they want it to look like, or what they want the script to be, what they want the results to be like. Sometimes we'll get that prescriptive, and then obviously we just work with that, hopefully add a bit of flair and kind of bring it to life. But other times they might not know at all what they want, and that's when sometimes the more interesting conversations can happen of like, okay, well, what are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to achieve? Where do you want to take it? And then does your brand have a sound? Does it have a feeling? Does it have a look? Like, how can we kind of bring that to life as well? We will sometimes literally show previous films we've done and be like, does this work? Or what do you hate about this? What do you like about this? Or is there anything here that's feeling right for you? Equally, we love it when they're like, no, we don't want it to be like anything you've done before, we want something new. So It's very bespoke. I think we're not one of those production companies who have clear packages on, if you paid this amount, you will get this.
Yeah, right.
It is much more bespoke, and they do slightly have to join us on that journey of visualization.
Yeah.
But we pull together like the most sort of fleshed out decks to try and showcase what their film might look like, and actually, ultimately, we don't want to get to a stage where after the shoot or after the edit, you're looking at it and you're thinking, oh gosh, that's just so not what I wanted. For us, that's also a massive failure. So if we can get them to the point where they like really understand what they'll be getting from us before we get going with it, that's ultimately going to be the best for everyone down the line.
Objectives, the client's objectives, are they based on the media that they receive, or is it based on the objective long term, i.e. we want this media to result in this? Do you have to look at both of those?
Yeah, it does slightly depend. Some people are coming to us for brand, like a piece that's ultimately just for brand awareness. So then, I don't know, I guess it does just massively depend. There's a whole load of reasons, I guess, why people want content nowadays. We at Tiny do everything from reels for social media content, or brand films to sit on a website, or ads, so a whole campaign of social ad. There are so many different ways and reasons that people come to us for their content, and then we'll just approach that specifically and kind of work out what actually works best. And I think ultimately what we're really trying to do at the moment is not just say, hey, we think this would be a really pretty film. Like, wouldn't this be so lovely? And don't get me wrong, like the creative side of us is always like, oh, can we try that new trick, or like try use this new lens? And that's sometimes great. But what we're trying to now do is actually go, because you told us that you wanted to attract this audience and say this with that, so that's why we're suggesting that we use this technique, or that we're going to edit in this style, or the music's going to be like this, like trying to just root it a bit more in reason, because ultimately, unless it is pure brand awareness, which we do often do, and they're really fun pieces, often, you know, obviously there needs to be a bit of conversion there as well. So it does need to be a successful pretty film.
Yeah. It's weird, you know, watching, I mean, perhaps I've got this wrong, but I could have sworn, having watched a few of your previous videos that the studio has created, there is, you know, even though the brief for each video is obviously different and they're different companies and different clients, there's almost like a signature feel that it's a tiny studio film. It's like, it's, you know, do you see what I mean? It kind of carries that character from video to video, which is interesting because, of course, each brief is different. And then that comes from, I suppose, the collaboration aspect of your team working together in the way they work creates that sort of sense. Is that something that you have it with the clients when you're hiring and growing your team? Is that something that you care about, or are you looking mostly at technical skills?
No, that's lovely to hear that you do feel there's a feel.
Okay, thank goodness.
Yeah. No, that's nice. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say it's like an intentional, I wouldn't say it's hugely intentional, because ultimately we do want to create bespoke content that feels right for the brand, that's not just like, this is what Tiny wanted to make. Like, we do, but it is lovely that there might be an element of a Tiny stamp that people who are watching, a lot of our biggest fans, can spot. And my role has changed massively from, do it all videographer 7 years ago to now navigating what it means to be a founder and director of 6, you know, the crew of 6. And I now am much more falling into, I guess, like a ECD, executive creative director role, where actually I view every piece of content that goes out and kind of just check its tiny approval. You know, it's slightly unspoken. In an ideal world, and most of the time, it's literally I view it and I'm like, smashed it again, guys.
Yeah, right.
That's good to go.
Okay.
You know, it's not like I'm like looking for tiny little things that I would do differently, because I think I learned long ago that you just can't micromanage creatives like that. But it's more just, I guess, like that feels right. So hopefully that might be, I guess, I'm not saying it's all me, because it's very much not. But I guess it's like we now have this pool of really unique creative talent. I mean, even like in the mornings when our team are chatting about what they're listening to, what they're reading, it's all very different. You know, our team is like very unique individuals who all love different things, which is exciting, because then it's this melting pot of talent that comes together to create different and new projects. But then, I guess there's that like overarching, like, does that feel tiny? And I guess to actually answer your question about hiring, skill is obviously massive, especially for the more technical roles like editors or animators. So obviously we are looking for a base level skill. But I think there is, it's trying to find the right vibe for the, you know, have they got interesting ideas? Are they approaching a challenge differently? Like that, I definitely wouldn't say we're looking for the tiny creative style, because ultimately that's the one thing we can teach them. Is like, if they come in first day and work on a project for a client that I've been working with for 7 years, the one thing I can tell them is exactly what the client likes and how we make content for that client that feels right for their like portfolio of content. So it's more, I guess, that we're just looking for them to have, you know.
And with the capacity you have so far, I know you have a broad range of available freelancers who come in for specialist work, but how do you decide on the core resources you need available all of the time? How did that kind of come about?
Yeah, it is a constant back and forth, really. I can so see how easy it is to grow quickly. I think when a new exciting project comes in, you're suddenly like, oh my gosh, we don't have enough in-house team to sort this, like let's hire someone new, and then bingo. But I think because we don't actually do a lot of retainer work, we are very much project by project. We're very lucky that most of our clients work with us on a very long-term basis. So we do have that sense that they will hopefully keep coming back to us. but I couldn't tell you exactly what work we're going to have in 4 months' time. So for me, hiring has always been a little bit nerve-wracking, but I think in a good way, because it means that we're trying to grow really sustainably. I would feel really irresponsible if we scaled up to 10 instantly and then had to get rid of people because actually we'd just miscalculated when and where we need the people. And ultimately, a lot of very talented creatives are freelance by choice. So there are just so many people to work with, as I was saying earlier, like on a long-term basis, you know, build those relationships with. We have a lot of freelancers who'll pop into the office. It's like they know exactly how we do it here. They know exactly what they're doing. They sit right in and they're down. But that's maybe 4 days a month, not having the responsibilities as the director of like, and we need to now pay the, you know, just like cover all the, make sure we've got enough work for them every single day. Yeah. And I think especially on the production side on shoots, that's where we really lean on freelancers. And whilst I have, my background is, you know, being a videographer, I now can DP on some shoots, so that's a good in-house resource to have. I would feel almost bad having a team of really talented DPs, gaffers, cam ops sat in-house, because a lot of the time they would actually just be twiddling their thumbs a bit. Yeah. So it's nice that we can just pull on those people when we need them.
Totally. And that thumb twiddling is bad for business in many ways. You know, of course it's an expense you have to bear on the days where there's no project work, but we see it quite often in other businesses which aren't necessarily in the same creative field, that what happens is that dead resource, let's call it, that sort of spare weight you have, causes your the vision of your company to misalign. So in other words, you start to chase business to fill the hole, as opposed to chasing the right kind of business for the company as a whole. Yeah. Is it your ambition to grow Tiny Studios very large, or can you help us understand what's your vision for Tiny Studios?
You have to change the name if you do.
I know.
No, let it be ironic. Let it be huge.
Yeah. This is what I've always said, is I think irony is, yeah, when we first named Tiny, I was working with the strategist and they were like, you do need to think about what happens when you grow. And I was like, it will just be, it will be really funny. It will just be funny. Yeah. No, but I think it's a classic. I do get asked the question a lot, and I'm not set on the answer, because ultimately I don't know where the industry's going long term, and I think any business that's started in COVID, which I did, knows the need of being agile and being able to adapt. So I don't like almost to set ahead like really far in advance, because actually I like that we're building a company that can be quite nimble and navigate through the needs of, you know, what content requirements are for our partners. But I would love to have, I mean, ultimately the reason hiring is lovely is because of that pool of creative people around you. That was why I initially started hiring when I was freelance and trying to weigh up whether or not that was the right step. I was suddenly like, actually, I'm currently in an echo chamber of my own skills and creativity and approach, and actually by having some other voices in there, it will just, the work that we'll be able to do will get so much better. And like the content we're making now compared to what we were doing, obviously, when I was doing it on my own, is just miles better, and that's exciting. Like, yeah. And so I think if by growing our team, we start to make even more exciting and fulfilling content, and ultimately please everyone we're working with, from core team, freelancers and partners, that's exciting to me. I think what isn't is the idea of becoming a big company for the sake of, you know, literally just like turnover or just kind of like bravado. And then what we have is a whole load of, I think, yeah, that, as you were saying, that like the mission might get slightly lost, and actually would the partners have a good experience of working with us, or, you know, so I guess what I'd love to say is if I'm listening to this in 5 years and we are a big team, I'd like to be really confident knowing that actually all the partners we work with still at that level feel like they've got that same Tiny experience they had when we were a team of 2 or 6. Yeah. So that's, I guess, our challenge.
And that would be a huge feat to achieve, you know, because
it would.
working with a company like yourself at the beginning of your journey, I not that this is the beginning, but in the grander scheme, it's an exciting time for a client because they get your best, and everyone in the team is on the same mission, and that's really cool.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think that going back to like scaling and getting more people in, because you've spoken about going from 1 to 2 to 5 to 6, like you've created this environment where you celebrate individuality. And I was just wondering whether you think at scale, personality gets stamped out. Like, how would you go through that hiring process if you needed to bring in 5 people immediately? Do you fear that it would affect the status quo that you have?
Yeah, I do. To be honest, I think I would be reluctant to hire 5 people in one go. I'm always amazed. I've got friends who run startups, and I guess when I say startups, I mean that kind of like literally suddenly get a round of funding. So you suddenly need to action what you've said you've been going to be doing, and you've got to hire 10 people in one day and suddenly start a culture of a company from that one day when all those 10 people arrive or whatever. Like, I really kudos to them, because to me that seems hard. And I guess that's why I love the fact we have freelancers, actually, is that in an ideal world we would use freelancers as a stopgap in that moment where maybe we would go, we need 5 people today. It's like, do we need 5 people today, or could we do 5 people across the next 5 months, and have freelancers just filling the gap while we do that, so that everyone can actually enter and come into the company and have the time to have that like connection with the team, their induction, and be given that like personal touch and be introduced to the partners that way. I mean, that's my dream. Again, I can see if you're a company of 50, that's probably unlikely. But ultimately, I think I feel happy to go on record that I don't think Tiny will or really should be a company of 50. Unless the model and the service and the approach totally changes. But I think...
Have you had to pivot at all, like since you started to where you were? Like, because that sounds like it'd be a big pivot. You'd move away from this like very bespoke, close-knit group to then, let's say you times it by 10. Have you had to pivot like that?
On that, I think that like bespokeness quickly, I think ultimately that is, I think where we would be stronger is actually being known for being, rather than that team of 50, is like being known for being tiny, but having like really strong talent within that. So it's people are like, they may not be the biggest company, but my God, Tiny are good. And like those people know their stuff and they look after you and they've got everything you need. And if there is a massive project, that's fine, because they can do it. Because we could like expand and contract with the freelancers to support us. So I think that is why, because I appreciate some people might be like, why wouldn't you want to be a company at 50? If it could grow that way. But I'm like, well, I don't know if that would be...
I think it depends on like if you have a vision or whether you just like care about making loads of money. I think that like when people think, oh, you have a company of 50 people, you must be rolling in it, versus like, are you still happy with the vision? Are you still doing what you set out to do? Or has that now been changed because people are throwing money at you?
Yeah. And also like we're really trying to make meaningful content. So can you still do that as it scales? Like, are you still giving that same service? And ultimately, like, I think I do my job particularly well because I love what I do. Like, I still feel so lucky that this is my job. I'm still like, oh my God, I hope no one makes me change my job. So I'm like, if that changed, if I created a company that I didn't like running, again, I'm not saying the success of Tiny is integral to me, but at least at this stage, it is probably like the ecosystem that we're creating is that it's important that's, it comes back to me or the team. Like everyone needs to be enjoying where they're working. And I suspect your partners aren't going to be happy because the content you'd be making wouldn't be as good.
Yeah. Do you think it would break your heart for content to come out that you don't get to look at? Do you see what I mean? Because you were saying that you, whether or not you're holding the camera or you're doing the final checks, you're still overseeing it.
No, I definitely wouldn't, because we already have people in our team who have exactly that same eye and like level of like I trust them to know also what is good or what isn't. What would break my heart definitely is seeing content go out that I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that's always going to be tough. That's always going to be tough. And I think, sorry, I totally ignored one of your questions.
Talking about, I forgot what it was.
Yes, have I.
It's gone into the abyss.
Couldn't have been very good.
Sorry.
Just
That's
ignore the
all right.
ones
You
you
just
say.
filter them out. If they're shit, like no.
With regards to scaling, obviously there's two ways of looking at how a business grows. And we're seeing a huge trend at the moment where people are selling AI tools for the kind of digital product space, which are in essence allowing single members of staff to do more than they would have usually done. So what used to need to take 50 people in the digital product world might only take a team of 10. Anyone who's had a go editing videos for YouTube knows how time consuming editing is. I'm curious to know if you have found that in the last few years, technology is helping editors like yourself and your team do more with the hours available in the day, and a few examples of what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean 100%. There's I think at the moment the rhetoric, or at least in the last couple of months with AI, has been like, AI is coming to steal our jobs, and like it might. I don't think it will yet, but at the moment, or at least it might, but currently we're actually in a really exciting, fortunate stage where the tech that has been put out and the constant upgrades to softwares that we're using on a day-to-day basis is like genuinely, as you say, meaning that we can do more in the day. And that doesn't mean that people can get lazy by any means. It's more just that actually you're able to do quicker workarounds to then go and actually have time to like try something else exciting that you would want to do on a normal but wouldn't have time. So I mean, for example, there was Premiere Pro is an editing software that our team use some of the time. We do use other softwares.
No beef, no online.
Shout out to Adobe.
Other softwares available. No, but Adobe have been hot on like upgrading all of their products really to utilize AI, and like we shot a film for I think we shot it 9:16 for socials, and then there was going to be a 1:1 cut ratio, and then down the line the client realized that actually it would be really useful if they could put out a 16:9 version as well for web, and that was like, no problem, we can basically just use AI to, I mean honestly how it works beyond me, but like manipulate
Us too.
But as long as it works.
But basically we were able to extend the shot, I guess.
That's awesome.
In width.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, as in
Didn't trim it.
that's what they do.
Right, okay.
I'm suddenly now like, is that what we did? But yeah, I mean basically there are so many different ways in which you can kind of clever tricks. I mean, poor VFX artists, I think there must be a bit stressed just because there's a lot of if, for example, like we've definitely, a couple of years ago, there was a reflector in the back of a shot that on set hadn't been noticed, and we were able to pay a VFX artist to remove it from the shot.
Game of Thrones coffee cup.
Yeah, like all those little things that previously you didn't want a shot, you could get out, but now an editor can just do that in Prem, or not now, but soon an editor will be able to do that in Prem. In seconds, just basically remove things that aren't needed, but things like that is great, and yeah,
It is going to trend. I think going back to your vision for tiny studios, staying a relatively small team focused on the task at hand. I do think these tools are going to help that vision be possible. I think it'll be freaky to see how much a kind of talented, cohesive group of creatives can actually produce using the relevant tools compared to just like 5 years ago. It'll be
I mean, it's interesting what you said there about cohesive, because actually I think that's something we focus on a lot as a team, is like you can have loads of talented individuals who have all the top software, but I think unless there are really successful workflows and processes of communication in place, I think it doesn't work. And that's something that we're really always looking at, checking in as a team of like, how are we communicating via projects? How are we pulling things together? How are we communicating with the clients?
Well, actually, you know what you're talking about with the cohesive thing. You spoke about earlier on how you watch all of the content at the moment that comes out of Tiny, and we have some experience with media, and it's edited by our great guy Chris. We love Chris. But when I see a mistake or something I don't like, I always kind of feel a pit in my stomach because I'm like, oh goodness, to fix this one little thing is going to take a huge amount of headache. Is that the case for you, where implementing feedback is tricky, or are you able to stay relatively agile on that?
No, it's really easy. I mean, I think we very much include 2 rounds of amends per project as a given. However, we'll always ask our partners if, for example, bigger companies, they might have more stakeholders involved, or if it's an agency working with their clients, we'll always say, like, do you want more included? And then we can kind of account for that. But there are platforms, Frame.io, love it, also Adobe, oops. But platforms that basically make it super, super easy for our partners to actually be like, hey, we just need that removed. And also, we're always encouraging of, like, the first draft is hopefully something that makes you excited, but please go in, like, make this your own, because I think ultimately you'll feel, as a partner, you'll feel proud of the project if it's something you feel you've also had your stamp on. I guess it comes back to that collaboration. Like, we do want this to be, like, we're open to ideas. We're not those creatives that are like, I can't believe they asked me to change that. They're wrong. Yeah. Obviously, we're not total foot soldiers. Like, if a change in music we think has really changed the meaning of a piece and the message is now getting lost, like, we will sometimes be like, can we just explain why we think it might be better to stick with what we had, or things like that. But
who would have the final say so? So say, for example, they really want the Star Wars theme song over some, new chocolate bar, and you're like, that's just not going to work. But they're like, well, we're paying for it. So where do you sit with that?
They can have Star Wars theme song if they're willing to pay the rights.
Yeah, the price just went up.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're covering the cost to,
But then is that hard for you as a creative? Like, because then essentially you're putting out work that you don't love.
Of course. And again, if we've had the communication with them and they're like, no, we'd love Star Wars, we'll be like, that's absolutely fine. Ultimately, like, we really want you guys to be happy. You are the ones paying for it. If you think it will get you better results, then, like, absolutely. We're not egotistical in that way. We have sometimes done director's cuts where we've requested with our partner, we've said, actually, we love this project. We would really love to post it, but we'd love to post a different version. And most of the time they're like, yeah, that's fine. Like, you guys can do that. So that's a nice way for our creative team as well to feel really proud of it, because ultimately I want our team to feel really proud of what we're making. Also, all of our team have the option to do freelance work as well on the side, and passion projects and things like that. So we often speak as a team about how creativity can also be fulfilled in other projects as well. So sometimes when a project isn't turning out exactly how they had totally wanted it, it may be that another project we're working on, or that they're working on in their, like, free time, fulfills that urge for the need for it to be totally perfect. Like, it is ultimately a balance. We're really lucky as creatives that we get to do what we love as our job, but at the end of the day, it is also a job, and we are getting paid for it. So I think there has to be that balance of, like, we need to do what pleases them. We can't be above that. We are a production company. We're not like, sort of, I guess. I think, directors, I guess it's a different world because that is totally their name on it. But
do you ever, looking back over the journey, you've come a long way, and I mean, we're in your office at the moment, which is a joy to be in, to be honest with you. The view is spectacular. Very cool indeed. But out of interest, just like every business owner, do you ever wake up some days and think like, gosh, wouldn't it be easy to be a freelancer? And
no, honestly, being freelance was so stressful. I found it really hard at times. I was freelance under the very cleverly coined name of Celia Films. And it was very obviously rewarding doing everything yourself, but the onus of doing everything yourself was really intense for me. I'm like, some freelancers are amazing. We know many of them. But I personally found it actually quite stressful having all that weight on my shoulders, and the fact that actually you're planning one shoot on the way to a shoot with a different partner, and then you know that evening you need to do some edits because the next day, or you see a missed call while you're shooting, because actually you are the only port of call for like all the different things that are happening. And yeah, I found it really stressful. And actually I was so nervous about hiring and growing a team and learning all the business stuff and having to think about policies and culture and all the stuff that you don't get taught. I didn't go to university, so there was no formal training there. This was very much, the whole thing's been very trial and error. But I'm so much personally better off, and waking up in the morning much happier, feel much clearer for knowing that actually there's a great team around me. Yeah. I often, like, the classic thing I get asked at the pub by mates is like, oh God, it must be so stressful knowing that, you've got this team of 6 or team of 5 who you've got to support and make sure you've got enough work coming in to pay for them and things like that. Whereas I'm like, well, actually, I'm not the only one who is responsible for like getting work in now, and for making work that then means that more people see what we do and we love it. Like, we are a team. Like, everyone we bring on is then on the journey of like, how great can we make Tiny, and how can we all thrive. So actually the burden is shared. Obviously, as a director of a company, you do have a level of responsibility, as you should, that the buck stops with you, and like, you are the one who would come crashing if it did all come crashing. But I think actually the team, and that's why hiring the right people is so important, because actually they're the people who are going to continue to make it great. And almost like they will be, hopefully led well, they will be the making of their own successes too.
Yes, indeed. And it's a journey that a lot of freelancers experience. It's stressful for a lot of people. And I think some people misinterpret, building a business or building a team as, leveling up in that stress. But it's nice to hear you describe it as a different type of work, as opposed to, it's right for some people and not right for others. So would you recommend to other freelancers who are out there to consider maybe building a team and seeing what other projects they might be able to take on with the collaborative help of their...
Yeah, I think 100%. I found it such a positive journey. And actually, I think ultimately, what I'll often say to freelancers who are considering it is like, if the thing you love is doing, say you are a camera operator, if the thing you love is just getting out and shooting, and that is really what you care about, and you want to be making sure you've got the next best camera and the next best thing, like, maybe that is actually the journey you should take, and how can you level up in that career, and maybe then go on to be a director of photography and shadow other DPs and learn that route, But equally, if you are interested by overseeing the creative as a whole, cultivating a community, feeling joy from the success of working as a team, then that is great. I think if you think you're going to be someone who resents not being the one behind the camera all the time, then it probably will be quite tricky, because whilst yes, you would run the company, so you could say, I'm going to be on every single shoot behind the camera all the time. That is possible. I know people who do it, and they do it very well. But it is a harder balance, I think, as the team grows, and as admin is admin in any business. And, it's got to be done. And I love it. I'm not saying I love admin. But I really love how my job role has changed over the last 7 years from being a freelance videographer, and I love that it is constantly changing, new challenges every day, which I don't think I personally would have experienced if I had stayed as a freelancer.
Cool. Can we talk about your decision to not go to university?
Oh yeah.
Because I think that's just it's really cool to see where you are now with, you know, a team of 6 in this really cool studio. In a sector I assume a lot of people do go to university in.
Yeah, I mean, obviously compared to law, say, there are more, you know, there are people who don't go to uni in the sector, but I think it very much was, at the time, quite a unique decision. So for context, I was at school, I'd been making films, as I said. It was a skill I already had. I was like a real hobby, loved it. I had actually been working with my school to help make them promotional films. They're still a client now, which is lovely. They've been very, very supportive. But I guess in that I was doing my first year of A-levels at the point where I guess people are looking at what university they might want to apply to, and if in the September they might want to do a personal statement and kind of go down that process. So I started looking around unis and going down that process, but ultimately I was like, okay, I think I want to make films. It's very practical, and all the uni courses I went to look around either were quite theoretical or ultimately didn't feel like they were actually going to progress me to where I wanted to be. I mean, my dad was amazing in this whole process. He's a very nosy man, and we would go round the university tours and we'd be like following the crowd, and then he'd kind of be like, should we just quickly like peel off? And we'd like wander down some corridors and sneak indoors and be like, oh, what's going on here? And I remember at one of the courses we actually found the kit room, and there was a lovely person working in there who was really happy to, like, she'd been on the course and she was really happy to answer all the questions that we had, which was like ideal for getting the real truth about what it would be like to do that course. And yeah, my dad was like, so what have you done since leaving this course? And she's like, oh, well, I work here. And we sort of looked around this kit room, we were like, oh, good, oh, great. Like, oh my God, that's amazing. Kind of came out, looked at each other, and we were like, interesting. Or other ones we'd, you know, put up our hands in the Q&A and be like, oh, so what level of skills do you need to have to join this course? And they'd be like, oh, don't worry, you don't need to have picked up a camera before. And we'd be like, oh, okay. And then actually one, London College Communications, we were really impressed with them, but they actually said, we don't take many 18-year-old undergraduates, like do some years in industry and then come back. So I was like, okay, that's always going to be an option. Clearly this course and this field you don't need to be part of a cohort aged 18, 19. You actually could be a sort of more, I'm not saying senior, but like, you know.
Those senior 20-year-olds.
Yeah, those senior 21-year-olds. But yeah, you could be older and it wouldn't be weird. So it was like a good, I guess, making that leap, say, to not go to university felt a little bit safer, just because I knew that actually, if I realised that was the worst decision ever, it probably would have been a backup. And yeah, so I didn't do a personal statement. I just went, right, I'm just going to go and do it.
Say no to UCAS.
Say no to UCAS.
So what? Tell me.
Time.
Fuck you, UCAS now. Talk me through day one of being a freelance videographer. What are you doing? You sat at your laptop? What?
Do you know what? It was tough, actually. Part of that decision also, it's worth me saying, not to go to university, was that I was offered a job with a video production company who I'd done some work experience with while I was at the school. And they actually, that day one experience was pretty much me emailing them being like, so is this job in Istanbul still happening next week? And they basically ghosted me. And then kind of came back and said, look, we don't think you're old enough. We don't think, like, there were just a few things that kind of came back, and they were like, but come back to us in a few months. And so I was like, yeah, cool, we'll do. And then I basically just like panicked because all my friends were going off to uni or going on gap years. Everyone had it planned out. And I'd been that smug one being like, I'm trying something new here. And then I was like, oh my God, this is embarrassing because actually I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have any work lined up. This is a nightmare. And then I just called up so many companies, sent loads of emails, and were just like, hire me. I've got talent. I'm keen, please, and I'm desperate. And yeah, so I got some work 3 days a week as a freelancer for a small production company called A Blink, who were amazing. And they kind of, I learned a lot there. And at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, like my old school hired me to do the work. That teacher, when I first said, like, what should I charge the school? I've never done this before. I don't know how to, like, charge myself. He was like, oh, yeah, no, charge way more. He was like, you're worth so much. He was like, editing is not something that anyone, not anyone can do it. You've got this skill. Make sure you're charging your time. This is how much I think you should charge. And so from that first project, my rates were, I'm not saying they were by any means sky high, but they were at least where they should be. Whereas I think a lot of freelancers coming into the industry, especially women as well, will definitely undercut, be like, just anything, I'll do it for free. And actually that's, I think, an experience a lot of people have had because they just feel they need that exposure. And so I was very, very lucky to know my worth from that moment, because it definitely helped when people would try and lowball me, always, obviously, in that first couple of years. And
Good lesson to learn young as well.
Yeah, I was like, no, actually, I know that people will pay for this. Yeah. And sometimes they didn't. And then, it's a decision, at least from your end, of like, do I want this job or do I not? But yeah, that was really, really valuable.
My understanding is that it's quite a male-dominated industry, right? So how has it been being a female founder of your own company? Yeah,
it is a male-dominated industry. I definitely didn't have any role models at that stage as a freelancer looking to, like, role models who ran a production company as a woman. There are loads amazing women and non-binary directors of production companies out there. I wasn't aware of them at the time. And it was, there were definitely moments which were tricky, just in terms of, fortunately, well, it sounds bad to say fortunately I wasn't on sets, but like, often on bigger productions, I think that the environment on sets can be not particularly positive for women or non-binary creatives. So I was lucky that I didn't have that, as I was often working for myself, so I could dictate the environment. But there were definitely moments where I would, bring a male assistant on, and then the client would like look to them for all the advice and guidance, and then the assistant would look at me and be like, don't know why you're talking to me, she's the boss. And I was like,
I'm just here to tie a shoelace.
Yeah. So like I don't think personally I've had a particularly bad experience with it, but actually in lockdown I co-founded a community for women and non-binary filmmakers, because as I was, I didn't know very many other ones, and actually there are things that you just want to check in on, or have a sort of network of people who are doing similar things, and sounding board basically. And it was a WhatsApp group with 5 of us, and then Izzy and I, my co-founder, we just said, like, add anyone who might enjoy this community. Lockdown's a lonely time, and then now we're at like 1,000 people in the community who are across all like parts of the industry, loads of different levels of experience and ages, and that's been lovely to hear, like, for that, ultimately get more women and non-binary people on sets and get more work out for them. But yeah, some of the stories you hear when we're networking in that community, like, it is a bit depressing, but I think the industry is making positive steps.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're helping move it in the right direction. And I think, like, if a young person out there who feels like, I'm a bit nervous about stepping into this industry, can come across something like what you've done, or what Tiny's doing, push them in.
Didn't mean to interrupt. How can they find the community that you've started?
Yes, let me plug it. So it's called Making Moves and Movies. We're on Instagram at Moves and Movies. And also we've got a website, Making Moves and Movies, where basically any women and non-binary filmmakers or creatives in the film and TV world can just apply, and then we'll fairly quickly add them in. And it's a Discord community, so there's like loads of different channels on all the different sectors, and asking questions, advice, sharing jobs.
You do meetups and stuff?
We do meetups, lots of meetups. We've done showcases, and we're planning our first panel event. So awesome. Yeah, cool. It's nice.
Well, in that case, Celia, thank you very much for your time today. It's been fantastic talking to you.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Thanks
a lot.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.